Dear subscribers, I will be posting a series of posts reflecting on my journey to Southeast Asia, in particular to the southernmost point of Eurasia at Cape Pi in Malaysia, then on Malaysia itself, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. Subscribe, write comments, your impressions. I need you. I hope that my stories will leave a positive trace in your life as well as it is in mine. Chapter 1. I'm sitting in a park in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, enjoying a calm and cheerful atmosphere. A passenger airplane descends silently against a backdrop of high-rise buildings. Nearby, teenagers and adults are playing disc golf. And I decided to pass on to you, dear reader, my experience of how I have been able to fulfill a few of my dreams so far concerning traveling, getting to know new cultures. My story will be based mostly on my diary that I wrote during my trip to Southeast Asia. I will try to show, based on facts, what I saw directly there, and that is happened and is still happening to me because of rather specific vision and actions, both important, that I took before the trip, during the trip, and after the trip. This began to materialize, to take shape in practical detail about 8 months before I left the country where I was living back then, which was Poland. Imagine the west of Poland, somewhere near the city of Wrocław. I'm like, quit my job, bought the tickets, that's an interesting story too, packed my backpack, and am lying down and wondering whether to fly or not. I feel terribly scared, and I don't know myself how events will unfold next. Backstory. Let's take a brief look back at 7.5 months before the start of my journey to early February 2022. That's when some events occurred, something obviously aligned in the universe and in my personal life. My work visa at one of the Polish meat processing plants expired. Before that, I had planned to return to Ukraine, where I'm originally from. But since I rented my own housing, after leaving my job, I could afford to stay for a while without going anywhere. Plus, as I found out the next day, on the very day of my resignation, Bob Proctor, a famous American author and lecturer, passed away. This was a person I accidentally discovered on the internet, whose views resonated with me almost entirely. So I decided to dedicate my free time to carefully reading the book that, as Bob Proctor said, changed his life. It's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. To be honest, I immensely enjoyed spending entire days peacefully reading a book. I derived incredible pleasure from the information I received from it. But let's return to the topic of the journey. Practically speaking, I hadn't considered it at the beginning of February yet. I had a long-standing, at least 10-year-old dream of visiting the 4 extreme geographical points of Eurasia, but it remained solely a dream for quite a long time. However, 3 months before the events described, I had already visited the westernmost point of Eurasia, Cape Roca in Portugal. I will write a separate chapter about this at the end of the book. This information will be valuable in its own way for you, my reader. Before reading Think and Grow Rich, I expected it to add clarity to my thinking, to help me sort out numerous diverse thoughts. But the book's effect began to manifest itself in a somewhat unique way. I started having thoughts about visiting the next extreme point of Eurasia, the southern one. However, it was significantly farther from me than the first, the western one, somewhere in distant Asia. I didn't even know exactly which country it was in. Initially, for some reason, I thought it was India, But after examining a geographical map, I discovered my goal, Malaysia. Gradually, I began to gather information about this terra incognita for me. What flights are there from Poland to Malaysia, how much does a ticket cost, and whether I could afford this journey. And suddenly, I found out that I could afford the trip financially. I didn't see any obstacles. The days of my new state passed. I finished reading the book and started another, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. It's more focused on effective business organization, but from it, I gleaned advice on taking 1 or 2 months of complete rest when important decisions need to be made. This was exactly how it was unfolding for me, strangely or not. Moreover, Tim Ferriss mentioned another author, Rolf Potts, with his book Vagabonding, about long-term travel and how it's more accessible than commonly thought. And as I see it from today's perspective, the chain started to form. Was it accidental or not? I don't think it was entirely accidental. As Chade Meng Ten quotes in his book Joy on Demand, a Buddhist proverb says, "When the student is ready, the teacher appears." Apparently, that's how it started to unfold for me. Thus, the decision was made to fly. I stayed in Poland because I saw the opportunity to save here the necessary amount for the journey. I found another job which had more days off, during which I found information that was important for my survival in another country in yet unknown Asia. Besides the ticket price to Malaysia, I was interested in food prices, hostel prices, and transportation costs. Gradually, I formed a more or less clear picture of what my journey would be like. I'll clarify that until then, Malaysia was almost as distant to me as Mars. I read topics like what clothes people wear there. It was hard for me to imagine their streets and traffic. This shows how far removed I was from Asia. To give a preview, I'll say that it turned out to be welcoming and friendly, as were the other 3 countries I traveled to after Malaysia. Initially, I planned to be on the road within 6 months, meaning by August 2022. But along the way, an additional 3 months of preparation were added. Also, I'll add an important detail about planning my journey. Initially, I thought of making it short, visiting only the southernmost point of Eurasia and maybe a couple of cities in this country and returning. But since I didn't have an European Union residence permit, after leaving I could return within the visa-free regime no sooner than 3 months later. And I'll say that all of this wasn't accidental, because the universe planned to give me more than I could imagine. It was only up to me to accept it. In this journey I realized that this is my thing. I like seeing new places, meeting and talking with new interesting people, getting acquainted, even briefly, with another culture, seeing that while we might appear different on the surface, we are all the same inside and strive for the same thing, to live. I found my path in this journey, and traveling is my path in life. In traveling is my place, and everything else is just preparation for it. Regarding the practical steps I took during the month to reach the required amount for a 4-month journey. Yeah, when planning to actually be in Asia for 3 months, I accounted for an additional month, just in case. I figured that immediately after arriving in Kuala Lumpur, I would quickly head to the southernmost point of Eurasia and mainland Malaysia with minimal delays. I decided to use only ground transportation as it suited me in all aspects: price and proximity to local people. Plus, I enjoy traveling by bus. So, at this preliminary stage, I found the Red Bus service website www.redbus.my, where I found a route from Kuala Lumpur to Pontian Kechil, the nearest city that could be reached by a regular bus. I bought the tickets later, when I knew the departure date. Regarding the flight, maybe if I bought it a few months in advance, I could significantly save on the ticket price, but I didn't risk buying it so far ahead in my situation. My strategy was to buy it about 2 weeks before departure. Prices are higher than a few months in advance, but tolerable compared to tickets bought a few days before departure. I'll also share a travel tip from another traveler, unfortunately I don't remember her name, about a situation where you find a ticket at an acceptable price, but the next time you visit the same site you see a higher price, even if you checked it the same day. That was happened to me. I didn't use this life hack back then because I didn't know it yet, but it seems plausible to me. So, before buying a ticket, clear the cookies in your browser and the price will return to the lower one you saw initially. I remember that feeling of mine when I'm already so happy that the ticket price is low and then bam, and the price is $150 to $300 higher. I'll also share how I found the flights. To find the necessary flight, but not to buy the ticket, I use the kiwi.com service. They also sell tickets, but for some reason, my inner mindset, I preferred official airline websites at that time. So, on kiwi.com I entered the route. The service provided me with the necessary flights, departure times, and the airline names. I then found the flight on the airline's website and bought the ticket there. The convenience is that kiwi.com, like other similar services, selects connected flights with minimal layover times. If these are two separate airlines, this is the only way to plan a flight without even knowing which airlines operate the routes. I was lucky in this case, once again. The airline for the first half of the journey was Qatar Airways. The second part of the flight was planned with Malaysia Airlines. It turned out that Qatar Airways allowed buying 2 tickets at once, meaning these 2 airlines somehow cooperated. The layover was planned in Doha, the capital of Qatar. After working out the flight to Malaysia, I focused on finding affordable accommodations, that is, hostels. After considering several options, including hostelworld.com and booking.com, I settled on Agoda. In 2022-23, it gave me good results in terms of the number of inexpensive hostels. A positive aspect was that there were many fresh users' reviews, which is important because it means the information is up to date, not outdated. On the subject of how you can live in another country more cheaply, I want to say that there are various volunteer services where you can find free accommodation, perhaps even food, in return for a few hours a day of simple work. In my travels I took advantage of such an opportunity once. I registered on the service www.workaway.info. There are many similar services, found hosts suitable for me, contacted them in advance, and agreed on a date of arrival. After I already had a source of information about accommodation, I started working out my itinerary in Malaysia itself. Of course, Google Maps helped me with this. From the south of Malaysia to the north, I looked at cities that interested me either by location, size, or previous travelers' reviews. In each of these cities, I found a hostel or hotel if there was no hostel with an appropriate price and up-to-date reviews. In making the final decision, I relied on my inner feeling, on intuition. If it said okay, I went with that option. I can say that I worked out Malaysia well in this way. For the next destinations, Thailand and Laos, I somehow didn't have enough time. And to give a preview, I'll say that there I planned nothing. Everything unfolded on the go. It's funny now to recall how unusual the city names were to me. I also tried to learn basic Malay phrases like good day, selamat petang. Now, a year later, I don't remember these words. I only used them a couple of times. In Malaysia, people have a good knowledge of English at a conversational level. It's also worth mentioning that after reading various stories, I decided to get vaccinated against tetanus and typhoid fever. Thank God everything went smoothly with both the vaccination and the journey. I would say I had no stomach or any health problem in Asia. Regarding luggage, I'm unpretentious in everyday life. On this trip I managed with one light backpack of about 23 liters. Inside the backpack my things were packed in packing cubes. The word sounds solid, but it's just small bags that add convenience when packing and unpacking the backpack. I also bought myself a rain poncho. I did use it a few times, and sneakers, which had good reviews, but the sneakers could not withstand perhaps the tropical scorching sun, and after about a month they came apart in the upper part, although you could still walk in them. This is a brief summary of my preparation for the journey of my life so far. Once again, I want to emphasize that all of this became possible only because I decided it was possible. Of course, I was helped by wise books written by wise people. I also benefited from sufficient time that I decided purely to myself for reflection. Another important factor that helped me make the decision was this question to myself. If not now, then when? There is also a good piece of advice on this topic. If you think you're not ready, that's precisely the time to act. And so, I approached the next chapter, the actual start of my journey. Despite all my preparations and planning, it still had plenty of adventures in store for me. I invite you, dear reader, to once again experience this fascinating journey through the beautiful, sunny, and sometimes not so sunny but always welcoming Southeast Asia. And not only to experience it, but also to prepare for your own next journey. And perhaps somewhere on the roads of our planet we may even meet. Thank you.